Hello and welcome to the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends. I am your host, Leon Wolf, and we're delighted that you have joined us. Today is Thursday, April the 30th of 2015. We're sorry for the technical difficulties that made us a couple of minutes late tonight, but we are glad, as always, that you are here. I'd like to start off the show, as I always do, by introducing my regular panel of co-hosts: Scott Lincicome of the Cato Institute, Neal of the Federalist, Jeff Blehar of the Ace of Spades Decision Desk, and F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon, wearing a very natty bow tie and a vest for us tonight. Appreciate all you guys for joining us, and I'd like to start off by introducing our guest host, RedState's own Moe Lane, also writes at moelane.com and elsewhere around the web. Mo, we are glad that you have joined us this week. Looking very spiffy in your suit and tie, sir, if I do say so myself. Mo, we're going to start off with you as our guest, as we always do. First question goes to you. We're going to talk, first of all, about the situation that's unfolding in Baltimore and continuing to evolve as the broadcast goes along. Of course, the protests and riots that have broken out are about the treatment or alleged treatment of a man named Freddie Gray, who was in police custody in Baltimore, suffered some spinal injuries and ultimately died as a result of those while he was in police custody. There have been some reports that have come out just today, reports by his fellow inmates who were in the transport vehicle with him. I believe I saw that there were two separate reports indicating that he was kind of banging around, might have been potentially trying to injure himself. And there was an anonymously sourced report that came out from the Baltimore PD today indicating that essentially he suffered some sort of trauma to his head that matched one of the bolts that was there in the truck. How do you evaluate the credibility of these various claims as they're going around right now? Obviously, we've got kind of the fog of war going on, but what do you think about the various things that have been put out there, essentially in defense of the Baltimore police about what happened to Freddie Gray while he was in custody?
Okay, first off, you can hear me, right? Okay, good. Let us be honest about this. The Baltimore Police Department has a horrible reputation. It's had an awful reputation for years, and this is not exactly what happened to Gray. Is not.
And so just so our viewers know, you live kind of in the area there.
I live between Baltimore and D.C. So so this has all been a very direct interest to me. Basically, I'm not really buying it, and the major reason why I'm not really buying it is this sort of thing has been going on in police departments in the Northeast for quite some time. Up in Philadelphia, they call this nickel riding. Basically, what you do is you take the guy, you put him in the truck, you make sure he's not too well secured, and then you just go for a ride, and you stop, starts, turns, everything. This was a big stink in the 2000s, in the aughts. It's been a big stink recently. So I'm not going to tell you that this exonerates the Baltimore Police Department. I don't think I'm not buying it, and I'm sorry to say that, because it would be nice if there hadn't been some horrible things going on. And I understand. None of this is any excuse for rioting, period. But again, as I said before, there is a reason why people assume police brutality, because this is not an unknown situation.
Bill, let's go to you next. ESPN's Stephen A. Smith, who I'm not real crazy about as a sports commentator, but he had kind of an interesting piece today, and he was on the TV, and he's talked about these kind of civil rights issues a lot. He says, look, a lot was accomplished via kind of civil disobedience back in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. By this peaceful civil disobedience. And what he said was, look, our ancestors, considering our history and the sacrifices they made to get us to this point, our ancestors would be ashamed of how we're conducting ourselves with respect to the riots and the looting and things that are going on in Baltimore. Set aside whether the riots are proper or not, the question that I have is, are they more effective today than peaceful resistance would be? I mean, we've seen some evidence that the Baltimore city municipal government is actually kind of caving in and giving the riders a lot of what they want.
Well, I'd say this is more of a reflection of the type of government you have in Baltimore rather than other big cities around. I don't see this as a big trend piece given that's going to take city by storm. What you have in Baltimore is a mayor who didn't like the police anyway. She came in and she's using this as an impetus to get reforms done that she otherwise may not have been able to get done. And we saw what happened in New York City with Mayor de Blasio, basically coming out against the police department because he doesn't like them ideologically, and that came back to bite him. But I don't think we're going to see that in Baltimore. I think this mayor pretty much has a blank check to, affect change. And I think it's also very telling that, she was appearing before NAN today, Al Sharpton's network, and pretty much saying that, she's bringing in the Justice Department because she wants them to go and reform it. And I think that tells you about how popular this would be as an ideological drive if you tried to bring it, institute it throughout the entire country, is the fact that she wants to basically cede this territory to the DOJ. That way she doesn't have to pay political consequences for it if, she ties the hands of the police and, sky is falling, crime rates are going to go back to 70s level style consequences follow.
So Jeff, if you look at the character of these riots that are going on in Baltimore, they are worse in terms of the scale of the violence and the destruction than any of the demonstrations that have come before, even the ones in Ferguson, definitely the ones in New York City. Definitely the ones worse than the ones that we saw in Cleveland. Is this a result of kind of a natural progression of a nationwide movement, or do you think that this is something that's particular to Baltimore to the extent of why it is so much worse in terms of the destruction that's been caused than has been in some of the other places that these protests have cropped up?
I think it's sui generis to Baltimore. I think the reason that Ferguson is essentially a small town. It's a suburb of St. Louis. New York City, to be perfectly honest, black population has been pushed out. A lot of people who would have been perhaps rioting in New York City 30 years ago live in Newark right now. They live in Jersey City. Can't afford to live in the city anymore. In Baltimore, however, there is still a very, very large African-American population. And as Moe said, and like Moe, I'm also from Maryland area. I went to college in Baltimore. It's very close. This issue feels a lot closer to me than I think it does for a lot of people as well. It doesn't shock me at all, given the notorious brutality and kind of incompetence and irresponsibility, insolence, if you will, of the Baltimore police. So I'm not shocked about that at all. I don't think there's a natural progression here. I think that this also gets back, by the way, to the question that you just asked a second ago. People say, would the Baltimore police or the Baltimore City Council, the mayor, would they be responding in the same way if there hadn't been a riot? Yeah, they would have. If there had been, days and days of protests covering the street, maybe a little bit of unrest, they would have responded. It's, I think, fatuous to say that, we need to, start breaking windows and looting CVSs in order to get civic change. And honestly, if that really is the case, if civic change in this country and in our urban areas is only going to come at the point of a riot, then we've passed the point of no return in terms of our ability to heal ourselves as a polity. So I don't accept that. If that ever actually becomes true, we're in a lot of trouble.
So Scott, A.G. D'Allen had kind of an interesting piece yesterday, and obviously he's on the opposite side of the ideological aisle from us, but he says, look, let's set aside for a second the issues with the Baltimore police, which I think a lot of people would agree that those issues exist. He says, look, the problem essentially with Baltimore is the community has lost so many jobs in the post-industrial era, and they show no sign of returning, and you have so many people with nothing to do, with no hope of their economic situation getting better. And I guess the question that I have for you is how much of the current state of Baltimore with respect to its economy can be laid at the feet of the Democrats who run Baltimore, and how much of it is kind of just a function of the inevitable migration of folks away from an area that might not have a tremendous amount going forward in terms of its resources in a post-industrial economy?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's nonsense for a lot of reasons. First of all, there are a lot of, well, actually, let's start with Baltimore itself. Baltimore actually has tremendous natural advantages that very few cities in the entire country have, whether it be impressive deep water ports or access to massive amounts of northeastern and mid-Atlantic population, not to mention proximity to the government, the federal government, that is. So there is simply no reason that Baltimore needs to be in the economic shape it is in. And in fact, if you look at similar industrial cities that have not nearly the type of geographic advantages I was talking about, they are experiencing far better turnarounds. And a lot of that, not all of it, but a lot of that does have to be laid squarely at the feet of having absolutely crappy fiscal policy for decades. And it's not just at the municipal level. It's, of course, at the state level, and then even going to the federal level, excuse me, with respect to some of our idiotic policies on trade and industrial policy and the rest. So yeah, I think you can place a lot of blame. Certainly, not all of it. That's nonsense, but a lot of it. And I think that blaming deindustrialization for Baltimore's woes, without looking at all of the other industrial centers that have survived and flourished in the last 20 years, is just classic E.J. Dionne, ostrich-style wonkery.
So, Scott, do you think Baltimore can come back?
Sure, I see. I mean, there's again, like I said, there are few cities in the country that have the type of geographic advantages that Baltimore has. If you could institute some sort of legitimate, competent government, I think there's a chance. That said, I think that if I had at the beginning there is perhaps insurmountable. Having lived in the D.C. area myself for about a decade, I don't have a lot of hope for the state or the city to reform.
So let me go to Neal, the last guy I've gone to here. I thought Jeff was going to have a question for Scott.
I was going to have a question for him, but it was the one. Do you realistically see anything good happening for Baltimore in the future?
Well,
he actually just got.
And I nailed it. So let's move on.
All right, all right, Neal. So Kevin Williamson at National Review wrote a piece, and he says, look, Baltimore has had 2 Republican mayors since 1920, 0 since the 1960s. Let's look at some other cities. Philadelphia has not had a Republican mayor since 1948. Detroit, 0 since 1958. Atlanta, none since the 19th century. This is essentially a list of the cities with the worst police brutality problems and not inconsequently crime in America. Now look, the last 20 years have seen kind of a number of governor's mansions that were previously thought to be out of reach for the GOP turn really safely red. You've had a lot of GOP governors come in and win these contests convincingly by making kind of the case, look, set my ideology aside. As a governor, I'm here to do a job, which is to run a government efficiently, and I can do that. Is there hope for any kind of municipal resurgence for the GOP to where a lot of these bigger cities can start to turn to GOP guys who run on the flag of competence as opposed to ideology in the way that a lot of these governors have?
I think there may be. It's certainly a possibility. I don't think it'll happen soon, and it won't happen without a lot of hard work and engagement with these communities, which is something that obviously Republicans aren't very skilled at doing. And in fact, there's a segment of the Republican population that seems to actively thwart attempts to engage these groups. I think I read that during the 2012 election, Paul Ryan wanted to go into the inner cities and talk to African Americans, try to make the case, and the Romney campaign told him no. When Rand Paul, I think, talked to the NAACP, he came in for a lot of criticism from the left, obviously, as pandering, but a fair bit from the right. Why are you wasting your time with these people who aren't going to be receptive to your message? Well, they'll never be receptive to us if we don't go and talk to them. So I think we have to start making that effort. And honestly, I've been thinking after watching, the violence on television and giving it some thought, a population of people who have actually felt the oppressive boot heel of the state on their neck in a way that some white college-educated libertarian never has and probably never will, is a natural ally for someone who wants to limit the intrusion of the state into people's lives. So we can connect with them on that front. We can connect with them on other fronts. We'll improve your economic prospects by removing tax burdens, encouraging business, that sort of thing. We have a case that we can make to them. We just need to make it.
I want to jump in on this, both in specific on Maryland and a little bit more generally. On the specifics, I'm going to make a marker on this one right now. I think Larry Hogan is going to win re-election in Maryland. I think he's going to do a lot better in the Baltimore area this next time around than he does in the first time around.
I bet.
Because if it has been like night and day watching the difference between how the mayor handled things and how the governor handled things. When the mayor was running things, they were setting places on fire, cars, possibly a senior center, we don't know, but it's just total anarchy. As soon as Hogan waltzed in, you went from having protesters being given space to destroy to having protesters being picked up and put in National Guard Humvees that didn't even break stride. That is a powerful message, and I think that's going to help us because, let's face it, we're the daddy party, and it turns out that the daddy party is very attractive when there's natural disasters. Moving on to the urban question, I think that we will be making inroads among minority groups. I just don't know whether they're going to be inroads with African American groups. I suspect that we're going to have a lot more success selling our message to, say, Latinos than we are to blacks. And I hate that because the Republican and conservative message is for everybody, but you got to work with what you got.
Yeah, and so I just want to add one small point here before we move on. And that is, I mean, I know that, we are mainly on one side of the partisan aisle here, but I would say that, a lot of this isn't as much a red versus blue governance issue as it is a type of blue governance. Here in North Carolina, I mean, in Raleigh here, our municipal government is pretty darn Democrat and pretty blue. And yet they understand pretty clearly that the northeastern style of governance just doesn't work, whether it be kowtowing to unions or kind of rampant welfare, corruption, that kind of stuff. And so there is a kind of southern style blue model that works okay down here as well. I mean, honestly, I think it's much more symptomatic of kind of the Baltimore North style of blue governance that's the problem.
Well, and I mean, Memphis is probably the highest, I think, per capita violent crime in the entire country. New Orleans is also fairly high on the list. So, I mean, it is, it varies from place to place.
Yeah.
But one thing that I would encourage people to do, and I think that this is a message that can be carried, and I'm going to go to Bill for this one, is, look, I would encourage everybody to go and read. Look, I understand that the Ferguson DOJ report is very long. It's 90 pages. Nobody reads anything that long anymore. Just read the first 15 pages, the pages where they talk about what is it that caused the cops to come into contact with the black population of Ferguson so often. And here's what it is. The city wanted to spend money they didn't have. They didn't have the guts to go out and say, we want to raise taxes. And so what they did was they told their cops to go out and hassle people and write more tickets. And there's only so much legitimate law breaking that occurs. And so they're going to go harass people for more trivial things, more constitutionally questionable things. And who's going to bear the brunt of that? Who's going to bear the brunt of that? It's not going to be the nice white folks who have the lawyers who are going to go to court and get all the things kicked out. And I think that there's a message there that can be carried to people and say, listen, big government is not a victimless crime. Bill, you think that's going to be a winning message in municipalities going forward?
Yes, but I don't see the conservative, the Republican movement embracing this message at the municipal level. If you're going to talk about decriminalization in terms of, hey, this is all just a cash grab by big government, I don't think that that is going to sell well if at the same time you are sitting there saying you want to be a law and order type guy. And I think that in order for us to take advantage of, for lack of a better word, municipal strife, we're going to have to do something more than say we're going to engage in decriminalization. If you look at the kind of little tyrannies that are popping up in municipalities and towns across the country, many of them are, of course, part and parcel to over-regulation and passing all these different various laws for everybody to break. But it all comes down to the drug trade, really, when you think about it. And without decriminalization at that level, affecting it from a federal standpoint, I don't think we're going to see the way for the GOP to decriminalize itself. Back into power. So I think we're more successful when we go for enforcement and tough love and paternalism rather than simple decriminalization. I think that's a winning message at the federal level, just not in the municipality level.
Well, there's a difference, though, right? I mean, it's not just decriminalization. I mean, it's not just we're saying we're going to make these things not criminal. The whole issue is the focus, is what are the police there for? I think there's room to say, listen, the police need to be doing more of going out there and stopping robberies and car thefts and assaults and murders, and less of going out there writing tickets to pad the city's budget. I mean, can't those two messages exist in harmony with one another?
Yes, they absolutely can. I'm talking about I thought we were talking about the political angle rather than the ideological angle. If we're talking about the ideological angle, yes, that's a fantastic platform to run on. But when for lack of a better phrase, I think we worry about overcriminalization more than the average inner city resident does. When you look at these cash grabs, and yes, I think Ferguson is a one-off in this regard. But if you look at cash grabs, it's generally targeted, at least in my experience, at middle-class folks. These are parking tickets. These are people who can afford to drive inside the city. They are, various traffic rules and red light cameras and all this stuff. I don't think that overcriminalization is as regressive as we're making it out to be. Now, if I'm wrong, somebody please tell me. I'm just telling you from my experience that this is my I guess my interpretation of it.
Let me shift gears a little bit and go to Jeff. I know that it's kind of our natural tendency to kind of criticize everything Obama does. I'm going to ask you to set that aside for just a second and look at what Obama has said in response to this particular crisis in Baltimore. He says, look, one of the things that he said, which I thought was good, he says, look, these people are not protesters. They're not protesting. They're not making a statement. They're stealing. They need to be treated like criminals. He talked a little bit about the socioeconomic things and the reasons that people get into it, but I think that he came down and made a firm stand on the side, at least, of restoring law and order. How would you grade Obama's response to this crisis, especially as compared to the other ones that he's kind of touched on during the course of his tenure?
First of all, I love the fact that when the time comes for one of us to have to praise Obama, you turn to me, the rhino.
You're the most natural fit for it, Jeff. What can I say?
But I would give him a B plus. Actually, I liked what he said. I liked the fact that he denounced these people as thugs, and then he didn't give in to the predictable backlash that came from various social media areas about, oh, you can't use that word is secretly racist. I think it was Ace who pointed out. He said, like, listen, the reason Obama's not giving in is because Obama's so stubborn he's never willing to concede any sort of error. But I'm still glad that he took a very firm tone and a much more. He's learned, I think. We can all compare this to the way he handled, like, Trayvon Martin. Oh, he could have been my son. That didn't help, okay? Then you had his handling, his sort of weak, kind of not really all there handling of Ferguson. This time he made the right statements, and then he had the DOJ open up an investigation, which is sort of a predictable step, and I think he handled it pretty well.
All right, let me go next to Scott. Pew poll in August of 2014 said that 69% of Americans believe that blacks and whites get along well. which sounds good, but it is a 7-point drop since 2009 when Obama took office. So whether it's fair or not to say that race relations have gotten worse since Obama's taken office, I think it is fair to say that people perceive that race relations have gotten worse since Obama took office. How much responsibility does he personally bear for this, if any?
I don't think any, really. Perhaps no. I really don't think any. I think that a significant amount of it is somewhat coincidental to federal governance. Certainly there are things at the margins, whether it could have been, the old beer summit and these types of silly things could have been handled better. But, come on. The extent to which the White House affects municipal race relations seems to me to be extremely tenuous. I know it makes for a great talking point. I know the hashtag Obama's America is quite humorous. But in reality, it seems to me to be a confluence of events that have little to do with federal policy and what's going on in the White House. I will say, however, that it is depressing that President Obama has been in the White House for 2 terms, and we really haven't seen any sort of improvement in the race card throwing and the views on our country's treatment of African Americans, and that is depressing. I don't know whom to blame for that, but it's a disappointing turn.
So let me take issue with that just a little bit, and I tend to agree with you that people place entirely too much of the blame for everything and also the credit for everything at the feet of the president, right? So his effect on, say, things like the unemployment rate or the GDP, I think is much more marginal than people give him credit/blame for on the whole.
Right.
However, in terms of what he specifically ran on, that he was in 2008,
yeah.
This was basically his raison d'etre, that he was going to be a transformational figurehead, and he was going to change the way that America looked at each other and did business. Is it fair to judge him on what he promised that he would be, even if you think that might not be fair in terms of realistic expectations?
Well, yeah, I know that's kind of what I was getting at the second point, and I don't speak French like you do, but let me try to translate. I think that there is a strong argument to be made that he ran on and was promoted as this great beacon of racial healing for the country. And that, I think, has proven to be the joke that we should have known it was at the time, or at least some people knew it was at the time. That there has not been any sort of amazing kumbaya moment in America. And as the numbers show, some people think things have gotten worse. But I think that's different from saying that he himself is responsible for the deterioration in the viewpoint. And that's the difference. So has one of his grand objectives, or has some of his promise failed? Sure. But is he responsible for the deterioration? No.
I'm going to have to disagree with this on a fundamental point. Barack Obama has been the worst president for racial relations since Woodrow Wilson, largely because he is pretty much the reincarnation of Woodrow Wilson. And we should not be surprised that the perceptions have gotten worse, because they have gotten worse in a very central area. In 2009, a lot of Democrats, a lot of ordinary, decent Democrats, people like my family, believed all this stuff that they had been told. And when that didn't happen, they didn't even try, that disappointed them. So I think that's why I don't think that the breakdown in numbers between now and 2009 represents any kind of racial animus. I think that it represents a certain amount of societal despair.
Well, no, and again, I can buy that, and I can even go a step further and say that I think that some of the behavior of some of Obama's greatest supporters, be it in the media or elsewhere, have I think that their actions actually have served to erode race relations over the past few years. But I do think that again is slightly different. And I know that I'm being lawyerly and parsing words and diving into nuance, but I do think there's a difference between that and saying that his presidency has actively eroded race relations.
All right, let's shift gears a little bit and move on to Neal. Let's talk a little bit about Hillary. And I want to talk
hold on, if I can jump in here real quick, if only because Scott and I disagree so often. I would just like to say that I agree with Scott absolutely. Everyone knows that Joy over here is the reason race relations have deteriorated in this country. We all know this.
It was me.
I personally blame that Harvey.
Listen, it was me. I'm willing to admit it now. I mean, it's too late for anyone to do anything about it. I'm sorry.
All
I'm
right.
coming to Chicago to do something about it this weekend, man.
Here's my struggle
Watch
of
out.
for you.
All right.
All right, Leon, ask me the
talk
question
about
about the old lady.
Let's go to 70-year-old female Hillary Clinton, and I want to talk specifically about the slow-rolling disaster that is the Clinton Foundation donation scandal.
Yeah, it's pretty rough.
Clinton signed an agreement with the State Department, essentially indicating that she would disclose all donors to the Clinton Foundation. The New York Times this week uncovered that a Clinton backer had set up a Canadian parallel foundation, the Clinton Geosta Enterprise Partnership, which was exempt for that agreement for the express purpose of keeping donors secret, contrary to what the agreement with the State Department says. And here we get into this Clintonian parsing of what does is mean, you know. It depends on what the definition of what it is.
It's familiar. Throwback.
I mean, how much blood is this scandal going to draw from Hillary before it's all over? Man, I think we were all discussing this 3 weeks ago. We thought it would probably be over by this point. It still continues to go on, if not get worse. What do you think the end result of it is?
Yes, I mean, it seems just like over the last couple of days there's something new coming up every day, and you look at the sort of frantic response of the Hillary partisans. They don't know how to explain this away because they can't. We had on the Federalist, Sean Davis. He looked at the filings. He put the numbers out, and he said something like, "Oh, the Clintons, gave 15% of their fund. The Clinton Foundation gave 15% of their funds to these grants or what have you." And these fact checkers were parsing that and trying to make it seem like 15 cents on the dollar isn't 15% of the funds. It's this ludicrous. We're looking right at them. So it's amusing to watch, and I'm really enjoying it. But do I think it will end Hillary's campaign? No, I don't think so. I think she'll continue to limp along, but I am actually beginning to think that she might lose this thing pretty handily. And if she looks like she's going to be a loser, who do the Democrats have on the bench? They've got nothing. I mean,
Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, they've got Bernie Sanders, Joe Biden, and that's about it.
Martin O'Malley.
Yeah, his prospects are great after this past week, right?
Yeah.
So
Lincoln Chaffee.
Yeah, America says who? And so
No, Jimmy Carter for a second term. If I can jump in here real quick, just to make sure that Joy doesn't get to talk, I just wanted to say about 30 seconds worth of material that has nothing to do with anything. I just want to say that the Mets are about to beat the Nationals, and I'm calling it right here, 2-out rally.
All right.
That's it.
So let's go to Joy, Jeff, and say let's talk more about this. Revelations have come out now that the foundation kept sloppy records, intentionally or unintentionally. They spent huge amounts on overhead and travel, and Politico reports that many of the foundation's biggest donors are reconsidering their 2015-2016 commitments. Let's posit a role in which the Clinton Foundation folds for lack of money, because everybody kind of pulls out with all these allegations of paid for play and so on and so forth. Is that an embarrassment for the Clintons, or is it the best possible result that they fold up and go away and everybody kind of forgets this whole thing by the time the election goes around?
It's an embarrassment for the Clintons, but let's also be clear here that when we're positing a world where the Clinton Foundation magically goes away, we're positing a world where I suddenly gain, an extra half a foot of height and, become a lot more handsome than I am. These are both fantasies, and they're not going to happen.
Do you think if you're a business owner right now, you see no downside to continuing to donate to a foundation that literally every 2 days is involved in an ongoing scandal?
Yeah, no, not much. First of all, the people who are donating aren't donating because they want actually to accomplish charitable works. They're not donating because they want their names to be associated with the Clinton Foundation. Otherwise, why have so many of these anonymous pass-throughs? No, the reason these people are donating is one reason alone, and it's the reason I think they ultimately still expect to be successful, which is they want to purchase influence with the Clintons. And then, you know what? I'll bet you that they're going to have influence with the Clintons. I think Bill Clinton and Hillary Clinton are going to reward the people who paid them money. I think they've been doing this as far back as Arkansas. Mark Rich is a decent example of it. Wouldn't shock me at all. I think they're shameless about it. I think you and I and everyone else here, and the media as well, vastly underestimate the extent to which Bill and Hillary Clinton give not a fuck for our bourgeois norms. They just don't care. So none of this is going to have any effect. We were just chatting about this. I mean, you really asked me what the effect this is going to be on Hillary Clinton's candidacy? Nothing. All right, she's going to get the nomination. The Democrats have nobody else. They
sure,
know
but in the general, in
the general, she could lose. She's vulnerable. But she's going to lose if she loses for reasons that aren't necessarily related to this. The only real knock-on effect I think this is going to have is that it softens her up. It does make her appear, which in a world where appearances are nearly as important as realities, it makes her appear more vulnerable, and it certainly gives an excuse to the media to cover her with much more skepticism than they have in the past, or they might otherwise have been inclined.
And if she does lose this time around, that means she's a two-time loser. That means the Clintons are pretty much done.
Yeah. Oh, if she loses again, there's a great little one-line throwaway in this Politico article. Which, by the way, I think that Politico article that you're referring to, Leon, is really oversold. I don't think it's in a death spiral yet. I think there's a handful of donors who are a little bit antsy about these things, but that's not enough to really make a difference. But there is a great kind of throwaway insult there about Chelsea, where they say they're trying to groom Chelsea to take over the mantle of the Clinton dynasty, but she seems to, by all reports, lack the leadership skills. And I'm just like, whoa, what is with the gratuitous ding of Chelsea Clinton in that article? I loved it, but it just seemed so completely unnecessarily vicious, which was the best part of that thing, I thought.
Start off with, it's not a question of if Hillary Clinton's going to lose. It's a question of when Hillary Clinton's going to lose. And this comes down to one simple thing, and it comes down to demographics. In 2008, they put together a coalition, an Obama-centric coalition. In 2012, that Obama-centric coalition took massive hits across the board, with one partial exception, the African-American vote. In 2016, they are pretending that the 2008 coalition that they had for the Democrats was their floor, when in reality it is their ceiling. Hillary Clinton has no margin. She needs to get the black vote to come out exactly as much as they did in 2012 and 2008. She needs Latinos to come out. She needs the youth vote to come out. She needs white voters to come out. White voters are not. And she's going to, they keep saying that she's going to win the woman vote, and I'm not buying that. I'm not buying any of this. The fact of the matter is, the United States of America, since the end of the Second World War, has had a habit of throwing out the bums every 8 years and allowing the bums from the other party to take their chance to screw up the country. It's our turn to screw up the country in 2016, and a lot of people don't like to hear that because it makes the entire thing sound a little mechanistic, and and people want to think that it's that heroic effort is necessary sometimes to win the presidency. I don't believe that. I believe heroic effort is necessary to win the state and the local elections, but sometimes we just have to accept the fact that that we're going to be electing somebody, so we need to make sure we elect the best person possible. And it's not going to be Hillary Clinton, and because no one likes her. Bottom line, no one likes her.
I think you vastly underestimate the first woman president thing. I think we men throw that off at our peril.
I think they could. So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about on the Republican side. I'm going to go to Bill for this one. New York Times had a piece this week that says of the top 250 Republican donors in the country, over half have donated to at least one of Scott Walker's campaigns. About 30% have donated to Rubio, about 20% to Cruz, 10% to Christie. Jeb Bush undetermined because he hasn't actually run for an election in so long that the list has changed. How much of a role do you think money is going to play in this campaign? And who will be the top contender to Jeb on the money list when this thing is all said and done?
Well, that's actually sorry about that. I had to unmute. In looking at the money race in 2016, I'm assuming we're talking about the primary. I actually think that Mitt Romney 2.0 is going to give Jeb Bush a run for his money and end up with second most money in the entire race.
Who is that?
Oh no, I'm talking about Mitt Romney. I think he's going to run, man.
Like the literal Mitt Romney, yes.
The literal. But no, if we're talking about a guy who can draw in money, the fact that and I'm not saying Koch brothers just to demonize them the way the left does, but I think the strong Wisconsin ties that Scott Walker has had and the donor list he's had from having his numerous recall elections, I think that is going to destine him for the number 2 spot behind Jeb Bush in the early going. I don't see Jeb Bush surviving 6 primaries if we're being honest right now. So I think Jeb Bush's donors, I think the way that he directs them after he eventually gives up his run is going to determine who gets the second most after Scott Walker, if Scott Walker stays in it the entire time.
So Neal,
and I see that Scott Lincicome does not agree with me right now.
So Neal, let's go to you next, and we'll let Scott chime in if he wants to as well.
Sure.
Jeb Bush is really utterly failing to do what Hillary Clinton has done on the Democrat side. He has not dominated the polls. He hasn't scared any potential competitors out of the field like Hillary did with Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah.
Other than raising a ton of money, he hasn't really done anything much. Why is Jeb 2016 not catching on in this cycle, do you think?
Well, I think partly because we have a lot of other really solid options to choose from. We don't have to go back to the Bush family for the third Bush in about as many presidencies, and it's really I personally don't really have any political objections to Jeb. I think he'd probably make a fine manager of the American whatever. But I have a deep-seated aversion to this dynastic quality to the Bush family at this point. You've got 2 guys, father and son. That's the best that you can do. You can't have a brother come in there and I mean, it reeks of a little bit of monarchical pretense. I don't like it. It's too patrician. So I think that's the second part of it that's wrong with Jeb is that we've had enough Bush yeah.
So Scott, Rubio is back in the news this week with with his poison pill amendment to the Corker-Cardin bill, basically saying that any deal that with Iran must recognize Israel's right to exist. It seems to me like Rubio is hitting all the right notes. To me, regardless of what the polls say, which kind of show him in that top tier, I think Rubio right now looks like the prohibitive favorite. Do you get that same sense, or do you think that somebody else has got the inside track right now?
Oh, gosh. Favorite is a really hard term, but I do have to say I've been very impressed with his ability, especially with the press, over the last couple weeks, ever since he made his announcement. I mean, I think he's done a very, very good job. And I say that as someone who is not inclined to be a big fan, who has some pretty significant reservations on policy. But I think that in terms of just retail politics, and again, particularly with the media, he's doing a great job. He certainly seems to be in that top tier of candidates. I want to go to Jeb for 1 second and say that Jeb is planning a shock and awe campaign when it comes to funding and policy advisors. I'm not certain that's going to work, but let's wait until we hear the dollar figure that they pull out after their first quarter of fundraising, because they are trying, so I understand, to really cause everyone to kind of freak out. They want a freak out number, and I don't know if that number is 150 million, 200 million, but they really want to put a number on that scoreboard that causes basically every political consultant in the country to crawl into the fetal position and beg for mercy or submit a resume to Jeb 2016.
So I'm going to ask the whole panel just to give a real brief answer to a question. Let's say you take Walker, Jeb, and Rubio versus the field. What % chance do you have in your own mind that somebody outside of that top three, Walker, Jeb, and Rubio, gets the nomination? Scott, what do you think first?
So am I giving a percentage? What am I doing?
Somebody other than Walker, Jeb, or Rubio. The rest of the entire field.
I'd say 51%.
You think so? You get the field over those three?
I think it's more likely than not that the field, just simply because it seems totally wide open right now. If again Jeb comes back with a crazy number and a couple of the second-tier candidates either fall out or just simply really unimpress over the next, say, 6 weeks, then that would shift, I think, significantly. But right now, I gotta hand it to the field. So.
What do you think, Neal?
But not that much.
I would put it at right about 51% where Scott had it. I don't think Jeb is really going to catch fire. I mean, I also don't think Walker really has it. I never really have enjoyed Walker in his running for president thing that he's doing. Rubio's the one that I think of those three would probably be the best. That's the one I like the most of those three. But
Neal,
I'm holding out
for that you had the exact same answer as Scott Lincicome.
It's weird because Scott does make good points sometimes. I agree with him.
Finally.
So surprisingly bullish on the field. Mo, what do you think? What's the % of everybody but Walker, Jeb, and Rubio?
Either Scott Walker or Marco Rubio will be on the ticket, possibly both.
So you get what, 0%?
One of the two of them will be on the ticket. I don't know whether Jeb Bush will be on. I like Jeb. I just wish he had a different last name. I also wish he hadn't gotten sucked into Common Core. But Rubio talks better than anybody else. Simple as that.
People like that. Jeff, what do you think?
And Walker just simply is. Walker simply has the record. So one or two of them will be on, and possibly both because it's actually not a bad ticket.
What do I think, Leon? I think basically everyone's already spoken for me. I think
About 51?
Yeah, 45. I'd say it's a 45% chance that the nominee comes from the field.
Bill, what do you think?
Rubio Harvey 2016 seems inevitable at this point.
Not Harvey Rubio?
Yeah,
Matt Harvey is not going to be able to come back from the combination of season-ending injury and
no. See,
drugs.
Harvey,
he's not 35, so
Harvey's going to sign with the Yankees in 3 years for $800 million. So that's why he wants to keep his options open as vice president. He doesn't want the 3 a.m. phone call.
You guys, to me, are
that's the only thing stopping him.
bullish, I think, on the field.
But if I'm going to the field, Leon, I think that I think we should draft Mad Dog Mattis. I want to see Mattis in there. Everyone talked about Petraeus, nominating a general. I say we go Mattis. We go Marine.
No. Well, I think that everybody's too bullish on the field. I give him maybe 20%. I mean, I just don't see.
Zero. I'm not bullish.
No, I mean, well, everybody but Mo is too bullish. I don't see the path to the nomination for anybody. I mean, it would have to be somebody who's completely on the mat right now, getting back up off it, somebody like Jindal or Perry, and I just don't think those probabilities add up to more than maybe 20-25%. But maybe that's me. We'll revisit
I think you're underestimating the ability of somebody who we don't like John Kasich, to come out of nowhere and upset a lot of
I don't think he's going to run. I don't think at the end of the day he's going to run. I could be wrong about that, but
everybody.
We'll see.
Snyder's
All right,
running.
so let's shift gears a little bit. Let's talk Iran deal. Tom Cotton has really kind of raised his profile in this whole situation. First question is going to go to Mo. Most recently, he got in this Twitter spat with the Iranian foreign minister. Has he helped or hurt his future political prospects with what he's done so far?
Cotton definitely helped. Although I'm a little I don't know. It's like Cotton was punching down. I mean, it's I don't think that's hurt him. I think Cotton. I don't think it hurt him. I thought the entire thing was a little bit weird. But I definitely don't think it hurt him. I like Cotton, and I like Senator Cotton. I was pleased that he won. I go back to the punching down thing. I mean, we're just going to get ourselves an excrement sandwich on the Iran deal. I don't know what we can do about it at this present time. So there's a part of me that just hates hearing about anything about it because it just reminds me of exactly how horrible the president has messed this one up. And even by Obama standards, this is a messed up deal. So I possibly do not have the right mental attitude for this particular question.
So Neal, let me go to you with this next question. I had the privilege of interviewing Tom Cotton back when he first ran for Congress, not when he ran for Senate. And I immediately, number one, was very impressed with him, but number two, I mean, he gave off the very clear impression that this was a guy who had his sights set very high, quite possibly on the presidency. But before this thing is all said and done, of course, he's going to probably need to marinate in the Senate for some amount of time there. What do you think about his prospects as a guy who could run nationally someday in the future?
I think yes.
As the Mikey from the Life commercials of this particular panel,
right?
He doesn't like anyone.
No. The limited exposure we've had to Tom Cotton, I think he's a very intelligent person. He's I think obviously got a tremendous record of service to his country, and at this stage of his career, his little stunt getting in a Twitter fight with what's his name, Rouhani, it just raises his profile with the sort of people who will like and promote him, and chat about him and buzz about him. So I think he made a good move. It's like, okay, well, he's a brand new senator. It was weird, though,
wasn't it? It was weird. I didn't really know what
it was a little odd, especially because he just had a baby. Like, dude, aren't you busy with the new baby? But
that's Mrs. Cotton's job. Let's be clear.
All right. So Scott, let's go to you. Marco Rubio said on the Senate floor, I think it was yesterday or the day before, he was defending, I guess, his amendments that Lindsey Graham and everyone is complaining about because it's going to threatens to kill the Corker-Cardin bill. He says, look, and I'm going to quote him here, if you don't want to vote on things, don't run for the Senate. Everybody who runs for office knows that what we're called on to do is vote on issues that sometimes we're uncomfortable on. There's a microphone here on your desk. You come here and explain to the world why you're voting against a deal that requires Israel to have a right to exist. The reality with Corker-Cardin, which is a bill that I personally hate, is that Rubio is one of at least three senators, who are running for president. How's that dynamic going to affect the chances of this bill passing in the final analysis?
No, I mean, I think it in the Senate it has a very, very big role. And that to the extent that these guys put forth grandstanding amendments, whether you like them or not, that are going to erode support or clog things up, you're gonna run into trouble. If it were in the House, then it would be a different story. But these things have particularly in the Mitch McConnell Senate, which to his credit, he's actually willing to consider amendments. It's a deal, and so whether you like them or not, these guys have the ability to gum things up.
So Bill, this guy that Cotton got in the Twitter fight was the Reeves. He says, look, he gave a speech and he says, look, as a foreign government, I deal only with the U.S. government. I do not deal with Congress. I don't think he's clear on whether or not Congress is part of the U.S. government or not. But he says, look, the responsibility of bringing Congress in line falls on the shoulder of the President of the United States. That is the person with whom we are making an agreement. I mean, the question I have is why at this point is anybody signing off on these agreements? I mean, Democrat or Republican, with a guy who basically takes this attitude, I mean, Congress's prerogative doesn't even matter. I mean, we deal only with the president, and that's the only guy we care about.
Well, I think it's very important to at least have on record the fact that this deal is so wrongheaded and so ridiculous that somebody needs to come out and say it. You know, the same way how North Korea immediately broke, took all the money that the U.S. gave it under Clinton, and clandestinely went out and developed its nuclear program anyway. I think it's important to have somebody from the GOP on record letting everybody know about how badly Obama and Secretary Kerry sold out the American people here. I think that's important. So I support Tom Cotton in this regard. And
are you in favor of the Corker-Cardin bill? I mean, look, there's an argument to be made. This is the only say that Congress is going to get, but the say that they get is totally and completely illusory at the end of the day, isn't it?
Well, the only thing that concerns me more than the Corker-Cardin bill right now is the fact that the Mets just lost to the Nationals, and I'm not very happy about it. But a Matt Harvey no-hitter tomorrow, which he's going to pitch, is going to be hilarious and great, and I'm very excited for it. Thank you for asking.
So, Jeff, what are your thoughts substantively, actually, on the issue, the question that was asked on the Corker-Cardin bill?
Well, I actually I feel it's important to go on the record as saying that the hoped-for Mets rally against the Nationals failed to materialize, and they, in fact, tacked on another 3 runs in the top of the 9th inning, thereby losing disgracefully 8-2 in their own home stadium, defiling the grounds that they play on. No, that's it.
Absolutely. The only thing more shameful than that was Scott Lincicome deploying his dog just now.
Yes. I'm trying. The more we ignore that, the better we are.
I have ever seen.
Now that said, let's answer the question very briefly. I think it's the best shot we're going to get. I know Ace, for example, was very gung-ho, saying, "Oh, the Republican senators have to reject this. They have to reject this." I understand the impulse, and he calls it failure theater. I get that too. But I say to myself, what other chance are we going to get? What other say are we going to get in this? Obama is hell-bent for leather on making a terrible deal. He'll do it. If there's no legislation that's blocking him, he'll make that deal. This is better than nothing. And if I thought a better deal was capable of being negotiated, I would support that. So yeah, I do, reluctantly, and understanding that it isn't perfect, support the Corker-Cardin bill.
Mo, final question goes to you. Let's talk about the Protein World ad. With the, very attractive woman that's been banned in the UK from the subway system. What's going on here? I mean, do we now have skinny shaming? Is it now not permissible to put skinny people on posters in the UK? And more importantly, is Western civilization doomed?
No, I don't think so. I think the Protein World, whoever they paid to get that reaction, they should double that company's salary, because that was perfect from Protein World's point of view. They put up the ad, and then for people who don't know, they put up the ad, which showed an attractive woman and a bunch of people who are, I guess, not conventionally attractive. Like myself, I am not conventionally attractive, but I don't care. Said, "Oh my God," and Protein World said, "Well, maybe you should work out more." And that really set them off. Everybody's freaking out, and now apparently the British government, which does not have our Bill of Rights, is taking down the ads, which were going to be going down anyway. But in the meantime, Protein World has been making money hand over fist, and they're thinking to themselves, "We must do this again and again and again and again." It just shows that for the people on the left side of the aisle who might be watching this surreptitiously and or bitterly. Really, you guys are predictable. I mean, you're heavily predictable. We know exactly what you're going to say before you say it. We know exactly how to set off your buttons, and we will love pushing them, and then we make money off of you. And that is the nature of things. We make money off of you. The Democrats make money off of you, the Democratic establishment. That is what you are. You are a mobile wallet. Please accept your fate, or not. Like, it's kind of funny when you don't.
I just want to add. I mean, I agree with Mo that we're not looking at the end of the civilization, but we do have to step back and acknowledge that this is literally Harrison Bergeron come to life. We are. I mean, the progressive ideal is where we are all faceless, formless bags of kind of, I think, maybe a tannish red goo. And yeah, and we cannot have any sort of beautiful or attractive traits. And that, I mean, it's just amazing to me that now attractive people in advertisements are the government is taking those down because they shame us for our for who we are. But
it's
that really
where
is
you live, isn't it, Scott?
Well, yes. I mean, look, I sent Protein World 19 different head and full body shots, and they picked that woman. It was ridiculous. But it is Harrison Bergeron, and it is kind of crazy how much Kurt Vonnegut nailed it.
All right, guys, we are out of time, so let's go ahead and close up. I want to thank our audience for being with us. Apologize again for the technical difficulties. They were solely my fault, not Aaron's fault. And we want to thank Aaron for producing with us, as always. Normally when he's here, things go smoothly, but this was entirely my fault on this occasion, so apologize to the audience, but thank you guys for sticking with us. I want to thank my regular panel of co-hosts, Scott Lincicome of the Cato Institute, Neal Doing of the Federalist, Jeff Blehar of the Ace of Spades Decision Desk, and F. Bill McMorris of the Washington Free Beacon. Thanks a lot, guys, for being here. Thank you, Moe Lane of RedState. Appreciate you taking time out of your Thursday to join us, and we hope we'll see you guys again next Thursday on the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Friends.
You should have apologized for the entire show.
You know we're still live, right?
Of course.
I know. I do it every episode.
It's
And we're
insane.
still alive.
He knows.
I can't believe you would mock my dog. Look at her.
Mock
How can you
it.